They spent 2 decades refining him, creating Subject 01, a ghost woven from vengeance and state-of-the-art hatred, designed to terminate the alien General Vex. They calculated the infiltration sequence, the kill zone, the extraction route. Every variable was accounted for. Except for the moment the perfect weapon looked into the enemy's eyes and decided that perhaps love was a more efficient form of chaos than killing. Before we launch into the void, let me know in the comments, which planet or state are you watching from today? Kael was engineered, not born. That's what the brass kept telling him. Every rotation of the lunar cycle, every time the atmosphere filters cycled thin, dusty air through the subterranean base they called the Cradle. His world wasn't Earth. It was an artificial cavity carved into the Sea of Tranquility, a Black Ops fabrication designed to breed the perfect weapon against the Saurian Hegemony. He was the culmination of 2 decades of genetic refinement and psychological conditioning. They called him the second generation, the successor to the ghosts who had failed. Kael knew his designation, vengeance incarnate. His primary directive was tattooed onto his neural pathways, overriding hunger, fear, and instinct. Find General Vex. Terminate with extreme prejudice. His mother, before the cancer finally claimed her, had ensured the hatred was internalized, a living component of his DNA. She hadn't just told him stories of his father. The celebrated Earth diplomat executed publicly on the Hegemony's holonet. She had forced Kael to watch the raw, unfiltered feed of the execution every birthday until he turned 20. A Saurian Matriarch, Vex, standing tall in polished jade armor, giving the casual nod that vented his father into the void, followed by a wide, cold, reptilian smile that somehow transmitted pure, distilled contempt through the vacuum of space. That smile was Kael's true oxygen. Today, the mission was live. The infiltration sequence had been executed flawlessly. Kael, clad in a chameleonic stealth suit woven with captured Saurian metafiber, was a thermal blank spot gliding through the crystalline corridors of the Citadel. This wasn't just Vex's command center. It was the symbolic heart of the Hegemony, a fortress rising a full kilometer above the sulphurous plains of Xylos Prime. The Saurians were predictable, efficient, and utterly obsessed with logic. That's what made them dangerous. And that's what made them vulnerable. They calculated variables, maximized odds, and minimized human chaos. They simply could not fathom a creature driven solely by the ghost of a dead man and a mother's dying rage. Kael moved with the predatory grace of something built only for this moment. His kinetic signature was 0. His breathing, controlled by the suit's micropumps, was silent. He bypassed tri-spectrum scanners that could detect the dust molecules of a passing moth. He was an absence of signal, a perfect killing machine ghosting toward the Matriarch's private sanctuary. The security was layered: laser grids, gravity traps, sonic dampeners. But Kael had trained against projections of this exact blueprint since he was 5 years old. He slipped through the final barrier, a seamless diamond composite door that hissed open just wide enough to admit him, then sealed shut with a soft, final thunk. This was the Chamber of Reflection, a vast, tiered space designed for contemplation and command, dominated by a single viewport overlooking the toxic purple twilight of Xylos Prime. And there she was. Wait. No. Not General Vex. The primary target was a 70-year-old hardened soldier with scales like granite and eyes like broken glass. This creature was younger, far younger. She was standing centered in the room, facing the massive window, her back to Kael. She wore a ceremonial suit of polished green-black scale armor that looked less like protection and more like a second glittering skin. The light from the dying purple sun caught the contours of her frame, sleek and intimidating, yet somehow impossibly elegant. This was Princess Viridia, the Matriarch's sole heir. The logical next step in the eradication lineage. The internal programming didn't stutter. If Vex was unavailable, the heir was an acceptable substitute. Eliminating the Matriarch's successor would cause systemic collapse, perhaps even more strategic damage than killing the old general herself. Kael drew the whisper-silent rail pistol from its thigh sheath. The weapon was loaded with a specialized tungsten penetrator designed to pierce reinforced Saurian dermal layers, coated in a fast-acting neurotoxin distilled from Earth's deadliest jungle flora. One shot. Center mass. Game over. He raised the pistol, locking the smart sight onto the perfect kill zone where the ornate collar met the spinal column. His finger tightened on the trigger, the pressure building to the necessary breakpoint. Vengeance. Father. Vex's smile. The mental programming surged, a white-hot wave of structured hatred honed over 20 years. Then the princess moved. She didn't turn to face him. She hadn't detected him. The suit was too good. But she sighed. A deep, long, profoundly weary exhalation that somehow managed to convey absolute fatigue and crushing philosophical despair, even through her species' naturally low vocal register. She brought one hand up, resting it against the cold, armored surface of the viewport. Her head dipped slightly. She looked less like a figure of absolute power and more like a creature burdened by it. And then she turned. Not abruptly, not in panic, but slowly, as if sensing the thermal drop in the room, her gaze drifting toward the point where Kael stood frozen. Kael saw her eyes. Saurian eyes were supposed to be flat, reptilian, and utterly devoid of limbic response. Yellow orbs designed for pure visual data processing. Her eyes were deep green, almost emerald, rimmed with fine, dark chitin. And they were ancient, not in years, but in observation. They held a sorrow Kael had never conceptualized, a profound, intelligent melancholy that spoke volumes about her mother's regime, volumes about the war, and volumes about the existential futility of the hegemony's relentless expansion. It was instantaneous. It was catastrophic. It was utterly, irredeemably human. The hatred, the programming, the 20 years of focused vengeance, it all hit a brick wall constructed entirely of irrational, blinding, overwhelming human attraction. His mind screamed, target, mission. But his heart, the chaotic, messy, unengineered muscle in his chest, didn't just malfunction. It seized. It exploded. It poured an immediate tidal wave of chaotic neurochemicals, dopamine, oxytocin, adrenaline, into his system, scrambling every operational command. Kael had been designed to kill the mother. He was prepared to kill the daughter. But nobody, absolutely nobody, had calculated the destructive power of a human male seeing an impossible beauty in a creature he was genetically programmed to despise, and falling, instantly and violently, in love. His finger went rigid on the trigger. He wasn't breathing. He wasn't thinking. He was simply staring, 20 years of focused malice replaced by the utterly illogical desire to protect this tired, beautiful alien from the universe that was clearly crushing her soul. Princess Viridia stopped her slow turn. Her head tilted slightly, registering the silent figure in the darkness. Her green eyes narrowed, calculating the new variable that had just appeared in her reflection chamber. She saw the shape of a predator, cloaked, armed, and aiming. She saw death. But she also saw the minute, uncontrollable tremor in his weapon hand. She saw the brief, catastrophic flicker in his optics, where his advanced sensor package failed to compensate for the sudden, massive physiological shock coursing through his body. The human element. The Saurians had always dismissed it as statistical noise. Now, standing inches from death, Viridia watched as the perfect assassin failed the final step, not due to incompetence or flawed engineering, but because the messy, Wet brain inside the machine had just decided this moment was more appropriate for chemical infatuation than cold-blooded murder. "You are not General Vex's usual cleanup crew," Viridia stated, her voice surprisingly melodic, carrying a hint of the same profound fatigue Kael had heard in her sigh. "And you are taking entirely too long to fire the killing shot. The neurotoxin needed to be deployed." Kael's orders were absolute, yet his voice, when it finally emerged, was a strained whisper, raw and entirely unauthorized. I can't." The Saurian princess's expression didn't change, but her emerald eyes widened by a millimeter, reflecting the sudden, total incomprehension of a species faced with pure, unadulterated human illogicality. "Can't," she repeated, the word tasting alien and strange on her tongue. "You bypassed 3 kilometers of Citadel defenses, killed 2 patrol squads with kinetic efficiency, and now, standing 20 meters from your target, you state you cannot execute the mission." Kael shifted, the rail pistol lowering infinitesimally. The programmed hatred, the drive for vengeance, was fighting a savage, losing battle against the entirely unplanned chaos of his limbic system. He felt like he was ripping himself in half. "I am supposed to kill the Matriarch," Kael rasped, his eyes locked on hers. "They engineered me for it. They engineered the hatred. They forgot to engineer my heart." He was supposed to be silent, deadly, and efficient. Instead, he was standing in the most secure location in the hegemony, making a declarative statement of forbidden love to the daughter of his lifelong enemy, risking the vengeance of an entire species based on 30 seconds of eye contact. Viridia stepped toward him, a cautious, calculated movement that showed she was still assessing him as a threat, regardless of his bizarre confession. Her hands remained at her sides, projecting a strange mix of serenity and lethal capability. "A heart," she mused, "such an inefficient organ, and it has failed you, operative, at the absolute worst possible moment for us both." Kael knew, with sudden, terrifying clarity, that he wasn't just risking his life. He was throwing away his mother's legacy, his father's memory, and the entire decades-long Earth rebellion effort. All for a pair of sorrowful green eyes. He dropped the rail pistol. It hit the polished floor with a muffled clatter, the sound echoing impossibly loud in the silent chamber. "My name is Kael," he said, the name sounding foreign and precious after 2 decades of being called Subject 01. "And I am officially off mission." Viridia stopped short, her gaze dropping to the weapon, then snapping back to his face. For the first time, a genuine flicker of emotion, a mix of confusion and sharp curiosity, crossed her features. "You have chosen to die then, Kael," she stated flatly. "Suicide is statistically illogical." "Maybe," Kael countered, taking a ragged step toward her, crossing the invisible boundary of assassin and target. "But love is statistically impossible. And that, princess, is fundamentally human." He had thrown away the perfect kill. He had destroyed the purpose of his life. Now, the only variable remaining was how violently the Saurian hegemony would react to the sudden, chaotic introduction of human romance into their perfectly logical war equation. Before Viridia could respond, the alarms began to shriek, a blaring red pulse of warning shaking the foundations of the Citadel. The exterior door hissed open violently, and 2 squads of heavily armed Saurian guards poured into the chamber, their energy rifles locking instantly onto the human intruder. Kael tensed, ready to die fighting. But Viridia didn't look at the guards. She kept her eyes on Kael, a small, nearly imperceptible expression of calculating interest on her face. Then, she did the only thing that could possibly compound the chaos. "Hold fire!" Viridia commanded, her voice cutting through the noise with absolute authority. The guards froze, their rifles humming with barely contained energy. "This is not a kill order, Commander," the princess declared, stepping deliberately closer to Kael, eliminating the small distance between them. She reached out a chitin-tipped finger and gently touched the hard shell casing of his stealth suit, directly over his wildly thumping heart. "This human," she announced to her bewildered troops, her gaze never leaving Kael's, "is now my personal prisoner, and a philosophical research subject." The transfer was not subtle. They didn't use cuffs. They used a gravity net designed for suppressing planetary heavy artillery. Kael was rolled into a transport drone, a sealed, sterile compartment, and rushed deep into the Citadel's core research sectors. He felt the cold press of defeat, but strangely, not regret. The fear was acute, physical, but underneath it, the dizzying, impossible relief that he hadn't become his programming. When the drone docked, a different atmosphere hit him. Gone were the military precision and the hum of plasma conduits. This place smelled of ozone, sterilized reagents, and a faint, metallic scent Kael recognized from his training databases as crystallized Saurian memory substrate. He was in the research complex, the deep labs where the hegemony broke down conquered technologies and, occasionally, biological specimens. They peeled the stealth suit from him like husks from corn, ignoring the state-of-the-art armor plating and going directly for the biological data. Kael was strapped naked onto a diagnostic table, a polished slab of dark, obsidian-like alloy under a bank of flickering scanners. Saurian technicians, lean and pale, with four-fingered hands that moved with unnerving surgical efficiency, surrounded him. They didn't speak, only communicated through rapid, low-frequency clicks of their mandibles. Initial physiological readings indicate a complete neural spike, followed by a systemic emotional overload, reported a dry, synthesized voice from the control booth. The adrenal response exceeds theoretical maximums for the species, sustained for 4 seconds post-weapon drop. Kael closed his eyes, his heart still hammering an erratic rhythm. Subject 01, we require verbal confirmation of the mechanism that triggered mission termination, the synthesized voice demanded. He laughed, a rasping, dry sound. You wouldn't get it if I wrote it down in your logic tables. The researchers paused. Logic dictated compliance from a prisoner, especially one facing immediate capital sentence. Explain the term love as a tactical variable. The voice instructed, its tone shifting to a clinical demand for data. Kael tilted his head toward the opaque viewing port, knowing Viridia was likely beyond it, observing. It's the biological imperative that overrides all logic, all training, all fear. It's the willingness to throw away everything you are, including your own life, just for the chance that the other person might smile. It's chaotic. It's inefficient. It's absolutely pointless, scientifically. He paused, looking directly at the scanner lens. And it's why your whole damn war is going to fail. The silence that followed was heavy. The Saurians were capable of processing pheromonal attraction, mate pairing, and resource sharing, all logical iterations of bonding. But Kael's definition implied a catastrophic failure state, a willingness to self-destruct for no material gain. They couldn't pass the algorithm. A few hours later, the Matriarch came. General Vex, Kael's target, was larger than her daughter, her scales a deeper, battle-scarred obsidian. She moved with the slow, terrifying authority of a geological event. When she entered the research amphitheater, the air pressure seemed to drop. Viridia was already there, leaning over a holographic projection of Kael's anomalous brain scans, attempting to explain the data to a panel of flustered xenobiologists. Vex ignored the scientists, her segmented eyes fixed on Viridia. You claimed the assassin, daughter. Explain the reasoning for interrupting a standard termination procedure. Vex's voice was low, resonating with a gravelly timbre that spoke of command and millennia of history. Viridia straightened, meeting her mother's gaze. Mother, The human presented a unique psychological anomaly. His self-sabotage was not induced by biochemicals, psychological conditioning, or external force. It was internal. He rejected 20 years of hate programming in favor of an immediate, non-reciprocal attachment. It is a trick, Vex dismissed. A fabricated psychological weapon to induce caution. It is not a weapon, Matriarch. It is a vulnerability, Viridia countered, using the formal address. If we cannot compute the logic of why the species sacrifices itself, how can we compute its defeat? This creature, Kael, is a living sample of the ultimate human failure state, irrational devotion. Kael, still strapped down and observing the exchange through the viewing pane, felt a surge of pride that was entirely unrelated to fear or hatred. She was defending him. Vex moved closer to the pane, her massive claws tapping the alloy floor. She looked at Kael with pure, cold malice. This failure state cost us 300,000 credits in damaged infrastructure and compromised Citadel security. He murdered 3 of my best security personnel, and he insulted the hegemony. He is the key to understanding why they continue to fight when defeat is mathematically certain, Viridia insisted. If the primary driving mechanism is this love, this illogical, destructive impulse, then understanding it allows us to weaponize it. Kill him now, and we lose the only known sample of a fully manifested human emotional rejection syndrome. Vex was silent for a long moment, calculating. She saw the logic in data acquisition, always. But she saw the weakness in Viridia's defense, too. The emphasis was too strong. "You sound fascinated, daughter," Vex noted, her eyes narrowing. "Do not confuse curiosity with empathy. Remember your purpose, Viridia. You were engineered for stability and succession, not for philosophical dalliance with our enemies." Vex stared Kael down. "Understood, research subject. You live only as long as your data is valuable. If you fail to yield relevant information within 48 cycles, I will personally dissolve you into biopaste. Viridia, you are responsible for the outcome." With a final, disgusted look at the human specimen, General Vex swept out of the chamber. The gravity net lifted immediately, but Kael didn't move. Viridia dismissed the scientists with a wave of her hand, plunging the chamber into quiet observation mode. She stepped through the decontamination lock and approached the table. Kael stood up, pulling a standard-issue research blanket around himself. "You saved my life," he said, his voice flat. "I preserved a valuable data asset," Viridia corrected, but her armor plating softened around her joints as she moved. A minute, almost invisible sign of relaxation. "You used logical terms to defend an illogical action." "That's a human trick, Princess," Kael challenged, stepping closer. "You didn't claim me because I'm data. You claimed me because you wanted me to stop hating her." Viridia flinched, a clear, sharp reaction. "I did not train for 20 years to destroy my own progenitor, Kael. I trained to lead the hegemony into logical prosperity. My mother's methods are inefficient, costly, and needlessly brutal. Her war against humanity is driven by vengeance, not necessity. Vengeance, hatred, love," Kael listed. "Sounds like the whole damn family is driven by emotion, not logic." He saw the realization dawn on her face. Viridia had spent her life quantifying her mother's failure through logistical errors and tactical missteps. Kael was pointing out the ugly emotional core of the hegemony, the very thing they despised in humanity. "My purpose was to kill your mother," Kael confessed, taking another step. "I hated her because she took my father and made his death a public spectacle to prove Saurian dominance. My mother carried that hatred, and she bred it into me. It was my legacy." He stopped inches from her. The metallic scent of her armor filled his lungs. "But the moment I saw you, all that hate, 20 years of programmed fury, just evaporated. Because the human heart is a zero-sum calculator. It can hold total hatred or total love, but never both at that intensity. and you stole the slot. Viridia extended a careful four-fingered hand, reaching for the scar tissue running across his collarbone, a remnant of early aggressive combat conditioning. "We are both engineered," she murmured. "You to hate, me to obey. Yet here we are, facing certain dissolution because neither of us performed our primary function." "Maybe that's the real human element, Princess," Kael whispered. "We break our programming. We defy the odds. We choose the spectacular, illogical path, even if it kills us." He reached out and very gently placed his hand on the smooth, cool scales of her cheek. "Show me," she asked, her voice barely audible. "Show me what this choice feels like." Kael didn't hesitate. He pulled her forward and kissed her. It wasn't like anything in his limited, simulated experience. It was chaos distilled, the desperate press of human vulnerability against alien strength, the shock of warm human lips against cool, semi-flexible scale. It was a promise of mutual destruction wrapped in a moment of sublime, irrational connection. The alarms blared again, slicing through the brief, impossible silence. This time it wasn't a security alert. It was a full, systemic lockdown, originating from sectors far above the Citadel's deep research labs. A small, high-pitched static burst erupted from a salvaged communication implant Kael didn't even know he still possessed, a subdermal node placed by his lunar handlers. The synthesized voice of his former handler, Handler 6, cut through the noise, distorted but recognizable. "Subject 01, you have failed to comply with termination protocols. Protocol Zeta 9 is now active. You are contaminated. Full system purge initiated." Viridia's head snapped up. "What is that?" "My fail-safe," Kael breathed, recognizing the cold, practical voice of the organization that had created him. "They don't allow failure. If I don't kill your mother, they kill the witnesses, the proof of their involvement, and me. They're moving to erase this entire facility." On the observation screens, the sterile map of the Citadel flashed a series of rapid, alarming signatures. External infiltration, highly sophisticated, far exceeding the defensive capabilities Kael had breached. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was an execution. "They're coming to kill both of us," Kael stated, grabbing a nearby surgical tool, a long, heavy piece of polished alloy. "They can't risk the data falling into Saurian hands, especially not the data I just gave you." Viridia didn't panic. She moved to a concealed panel and pulled out a sleek, compact energy weapon, its housing crafted from the same dark material as her armor. "My mother's forces are mobilized toward the perimeter breach," Viridia analyzed, her eyes scanning the facility map. "She is fighting your trainers. We are trapped between two forces of absolute programmed hatred." Kael felt a grin stretch across his face, wild and desperate. "Perfect. We don't fight hate with hate, Princess. We fight it with something they can't compute." He looked at her, the heir to the hegemony, standing beside the assassin who was supposed to destroy her family. "Do you trust the illogical choice?" he asked her. Viridia hefted the energy weapon, her stance shifting from royal heir to combat operative. "Lead the way, Kael. If we are to die, let it be in glorious defiance of all possible statistics." The command center was 300 meters up and 2 corridors deep, guarded by the oldest, heaviest defensive systems the Saurian Hegemony maintained. Kael didn't bother trying to hack the biometric locks. That was the work of a spy. He was an executioner. "Hold fast," Kael grunted, placing 2 blocks of lunar issue thermal explosive against the corridor seam. "Stand back." Viridia, looking magnificent and utterly terrifying in her battle-scarred armor, didn't flinch. She simply angled her plasma rifle away from the blast zone, ready to cover the breach. Boom. The explosive charge vaporized the 2-meter-thick plasteel hatch, showering the corridor with molten droplets and screaming alarm sirens. Kael didn't hesitate.
He rolled through the smoking cavity,
firing suppressive bursts with his captured submachine gun, maximizing noise and panic. "They are using chemical suppressants," Viridia yelled, following him cleanly. "Saurian guards are compromised." Kael laughed, a short, hacking sound that tasted like dust and adrenaline. "That's the beauty of it, Princess. The Lunar boys brought chemical weapons to soften the perimeter. Your mother's defense forces are blind, confused, and fighting the air. We're going to walk right through their command structure while they're busy killing each other." They moved like a single hybrid entity. Kael was a blur of low-profile movement, leveraging human flexibility and speed, dropping low, changing trajectory, and slipping past sensor arrays designed for the large, reptilian gait of the Saurians. Viridia was the hammer, her steps powerful and absolute. Where Kael's shots were precise, short bursts designed to suppress, Viridia's weapon spat plasma bolts that evaporated cover and left burning trails of synthetic pheromones in the air. They reached the observation balcony overlooking the main control deck. Below, General Vex, the Matriarch, the orchestrator of Kael's suffering, stood at the central holotable, her massive scale armor gleaming despite the stress of the siege. She was issuing orders in harsh, clipped Saurian, her tail lashing with frustration. The battle below was pure chaos. Saurian guards, choking on the Black Ops gas, were firing into shadows, while the lunar infiltrators, all hardened, emotionless clones barely older than Kael, were systematically eliminating the confused resistance, moving with cold, programmed efficiency. Kael raised his rifle, sighting the Matriarch. The distance was perfect. The kill shot was undeniable. 20 years of training. The weight of his father's last anguished scream on the public broadcast network. The promise made to his dying mother. "Exterminate the Vex line." His finger tightened on the trigger. Click. He couldn't pull it. The paralysis lasted maybe half a second, but in that fractional moment of human doubt, the sheer, uncomputable nature of his heart roared to life. Killing Vex was justice for his parents, but killing Vex meant leaving Viridia, the only person who had ever seen past the programming, alone against the full might of the lunar organization. Contamination. Handler 6 was right. Kael was contaminated by something illogical, something Saurians had spent millennia trying to engineer out of their own species. Self-sacrificial love. Vex, sensing the shift in the ambient energy, looked up. Her cold, imperial eyes met Kael's, and then she saw Viridia standing beside him. The Matriarch didn't react with rage, but with utter, horrified comprehension. She had expected an assassin, a weapon of war. She found instead a tragedy, the betrayal of her own bloodline standing beside the thing she hated most, a human. "Viridia!" Vex's voice boomed across the control deck, laced with metallic venom. "You have allied yourself with the vermin who seeks to desecrate our bloodline. This is unforgivable." Vex didn't waste time on dialogue. She activated a hidden panel on the console, transforming the holotable into a shimmering personal energy shield, and drew a weapon, a heavy-caliber sonic disruptor. She aimed, not at Kael, but at Viridia. The infestation must be cut out immediately. That was the trigger. The hate programming melted away, replaced by the primal, incandescent need to protect. Kael threw himself over the railing, pulling Viridia down with him. They dropped 15 feet onto the control deck, impacting hard, just as the sonic beam detonated the space where they had been standing, bathing the air in a blinding flash. "She's yours, Princess," Kael yelled, scrambling backward, switching his focus entirely to the advancing lunar operatives who were now converging on the control deck, recognizing their target subject. "I neutralize the secondary threats. You focus on the primary target." Viridia stepped forward, her regal posture returning, but overlaid with predatory menace. She raised her own compact weapon and engaged her mother. The ensuing battle was unlike anything recorded in the Hegemony archives. 2 generations of Saurian royalty fighting each other, one fueled by imperial dogma, the other by a desperate hope for change, defending a human who was now fighting clones of himself. Kael was in his element. He fought with reckless abandon, utilizing the sheer speed and unpredictability that the lunar clones, focused entirely on structured takedowns, could not anticipate. He didn't just fire. He vaulted over consoles, smashed display screens to create reflective chaos, and used the disorientation gas still circulating to mask his movements. He executed 2 clones, then dodged a third by dropping into an access vent and emerging behind the group, delivering a precise, fatal neck snap. Subject Era 1, you are fighting your own assets. Stand down. Handler 6's voice echoed directly into Kael's internal comms, cutting through the combat noise. The purge is designed to ensure the mission parameters are met, regardless of your contamination. If you continue resisting, Protocol Omega will be initiated. Omega? Kael gasped, reloading in the frantic cover of a smoking server rack. Self-destruct sequence. The facility is compromised. We will not allow Saurian hands to collect 20 years of research on human combat evolution. If we fail, we burn the site, and you with it. Kael's blood ran cold, but only for a second. The lunar base didn't just want to kill Viridia's mother. They wanted to destroy any proof that they had created Kael. They were willing to sacrifice thousands of lives and a tactical victory just to sanitize their data. You're not doing this for revenge, Handler 6, Kael spat into the comms. You're doing this for balance sheets and deniability. He looked toward the central duel. Viridia was holding her own, forcing Vex to rely solely on her energy shield and the immense firepower of the sonic disruptor. The princess's attacks were relentless, aimed not to kill, but to disable the Matriarch's mobility. Handler 6, I have the Matriarch neutralized and contained. Kael lied brazenly into the comms, pushing the boundaries of his programmed obedience. The asset is secured. Recall Omega and extract the subject. There was a heavy static pause. Kael knew the lie wouldn't hold up to remote sensor verification, but he needed seconds. Negative, Subject 01. Sensor readings indicate the Matriarch is still combat active, and you are actively engaging extraction assets. Protocol Omega initiated. Estimated time to critical thermal overload, 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Kael looked at the flickering holomap. The Citadel was powered by a geothermal core deep beneath the surface. If that went critical, the entire facility, and everyone in it, would be vaporized. He slammed his fist against the console, overriding the local power controls. Viridia, forget your mother. The Lunar Organization is initiating self-destruct. We have 5 minutes to shut down the core failsafe. Viridia didn't even turn around. She dodged a blinding sonic burst that ripped through the air where Kael had been standing. I know where the core access is, she shouted back, her voice tight with strain. But the control structure requires Matriarch-level authorization. Kael grabbed the surgical tool he had picked up earlier, the long, heavy piece of polished alloy, and sprinted toward the main Matriarch command station. The last 4 lunar operatives were still converging, but Kael shifted his tactics from neutralization to pure distraction. He tossed a concussion grenade backward, knowing it would buy him 3 precious seconds. He reached the shield encompassing Vex. The Matriarch, seeing him approach, focused the full power of her sonic weapon on Kael. You have chosen poorly, human, Vex hissed, the sound barely audible over the crackling power of her weapon. I will make sure your death is painful enough to be broadcast. Kael didn't speak. He slammed the alloy tool, a simple, dense, non-electronic instrument, with all his strength into a single specific point on the Matriarch's energy shield generator. The Lunar Black Ops had taught him every Saurian weakness. They had taught him how their hyper-efficient, crystalline energy matrix relied on flawless, synchronized harmonics. A sudden, non-conductive, brute-force kinetic impact in the wrong place wouldn't breach the shield, but it would shatter the synchronization. Shing! The protective field overloaded violently, sparking and collapsing inward. Vex staggered back, momentarily blinded by the kinetic feedback. Kael used the opportunity not to kill her, but to tear the authorization data chip directly from the collar of her battle armor. The movement was fast, trained, and executed with cold precision. He tossed the chip to Viridia. Authorization acquired. Go. I'll deal with the core fail-safe command network here. Viridia caught the chip mid-air, her eyes wide with shock and a blazing intensity Kael had never seen before. She hesitated, looking from the incapacitated form of her mother, who was slowly beginning to recover, to Kael, who was now drawing the attention of the remaining lunar clones. "Kael," she said, her voice dropping to a low, powerful growl. "If I leave, you will die. If you stay, we both die when this place vaporizes." Kael shot back, firing the rest of his magazine at the incoming threats. He dropped the empty weapon and grabbed a discarded Saurian sidearm. "Go! Show them what uncomputable truly means." Viridia nodded, a single decisive movement. She didn't look back at her mother, who was now screaming in fury and betrayal. Viridia ran, sprinting toward the hidden emergency lift that led directly to the core substructure. Kael found himself alone against 3 heavily armored, genetically identical assassins. This was it. The last stand. He didn't fight for life. He fought for time. He fought with the fury of a man who realized that his life's purpose, revenge, was a hollow construct, and the true purpose was the future he had inadvertently created. The clones pressed him back, their disciplined fire driving him toward the Matriarch's primary control console. Kael knew he couldn't survive this engagement, but he could deny them the final victory. Handler 6's voice returned, panicked now. "Subject 01, you have initiated core shutdown sequence. Abort. That is an unauthorized action. You are jeopardizing the entire mission integrity." "Mission integrity is dead, Handler 6, Kael screamed, dodging a plasma blast that seared the air beside his ear. "You wanted to kill Vex because she killed my father. I chose to save her daughter because she gave me a reason to live. The human element, 6. It's the part you forgot to program." He didn't bother looking at the controls. Guided by his deep, innate knowledge of alien engineering, knowledge Viridia had unknowingly given him, he reached into the console and began systematically destroying the redundant communication conduits linking the Citadel to the orbiting lunar command vessel. He was hit. A low-powered energy blast from one of the clones slammed into his side, knocking the air from his lungs and sending him sprawling. As the clones advanced for the final execution, Kael looked up. He could hear the grinding groan of the geothermal core stabilizers being engaged, a massive mechanical sigh of relief deep beneath the facility. Viridia had done it. She had stabilized the Citadel. "I have killed General Vex's legacy, Handler 6, Kael whispered, bloody and battered, staring up at the faces of his executioners. Not by termination, but by redirection. He reached out, his hand finding the main access power conduit, a thick, humming cable that fed directly into the external communications array. "You wanted to erase the data? You wanted to cleanse the infection?" Kael pulled the cable free with a final, desperate surge of strength. "Fine. You get nothing." The entire external communications system of the Citadel shorted out with a blinding flash and a deafening roar. Kael's vision went white, then black. He woke to the smell of antiseptic and ozone. His chest felt heavy, his ribs wrapped tight. The room was sterile, saurian and quiet. "Welcome back, Kael." Viridia was sitting beside his recovery couch, but she was no longer wearing her battle armor. She was dressed in traditional Saurian command silks, dark purple and gold, signaling authority. She had a small bandage on her forearm, but otherwise looked perfect, terrifyingly composed. "The core is stable," Kael managed, his voice raspy. "The core is stable," Viridia confirmed. "You destroyed the external relay. Protocol Omega was halted just as the thermal containment initiated. The lunar vessel in orbit, realizing they had lost communication and control, retreated. They believe the Citadel was successfully purged. And your mother?" Viridia's expression was unreadable, a cool mask of authority. "General Vex survived the overload. She is currently confined to a specialized holding environment, charged with treason against the hegemony, namely, engaging in unsanctioned chemical warfare against her own troops during the internal conflict." Kael stared at her. Treason. But she was defending the Citadel. "No," Viridia corrected, leaning closer. "She was fighting the lunar organization, yes, but her command sequence indicates she planned to sacrifice her own command structure to maintain her authority. I, however, saved the facility. With the military command structure decimated and the Citadel stabilized, the political reality demanded a shift in power." She reached out, touching his bruised cheek, her scales surprisingly cool and soft against his skin. "Kael, you made a choice that no Saurian could ever calculate. You threw away vengeance for the sake of the future. You were engineered to hate my mother, but you were never engineered to understand the politics of love. You didn't kill the Matriarch. You deposed her." She paused, adjusting the high collar of her silks. "By destroying the Black Ops communications, you destroyed the only proof of my mother's crimes and the only proof of your existence. To the outside galaxy, I restored order following an unfortunate internal conflict and contained the dissenting elements. So, I'm just a political myth now?" Kael asked. Viridia smiled, a subtle, beautiful tightening around her jaws. "You are my matriarch god, Kael, the highest rank of personal protection, established by the new leadership. You are the invisible force that keeps the hegemony safe. No one must know your origin, no one must know your capabilities, and certainly, no one must know that the new matriarch is completely, illogically devoted to the engineered assassin who saved her. Your engineering taught you to kill my mother. Your heart taught me how to rule without becoming her." She stood up, her silhouette commanding the vast, sterile room. "I need a force that understands chaos, Kael. A force that fights hate not with logic, but with something utterly uncomputable. And only a human, one who has traded perfect vengeance for imperfect love, can fill that role." She turned to leave the medbay, but stopped at the doorway. "The human heart," she mused, half to herself. "What a terrible, wonderful weapon,